Leaked data from the Silverstone simulator just sent a shockwave through the entire Formula One paddock. Reports suggest Adrian Newey hasn't just built a new car, but has actually broken the 2026 regulations before the season even starts. You have to look at the date to understand the panic spreading through rival garages this morning. It is January 21st, 2026, meaning we are exactly 5 days away from the first official preseason test in Barcelona, with the Aston Martin AMR26 launch set for February 9th. Every team, from Ferrari to Audi, has spent the last 12 months working under the assumption that the new 2026 technical regulations would slash downforce by roughly 40%. The rules were written explicitly to slow these cars down by shrinking their width and forcing them to rely on complex, active aerodynamics just to stay stable on the straights. However, rumors emerging late last night from Aston Martin's HQ defy those physics. Sources indicate that Adrian Newey delayed the final suspension sign-off until the absolute last second in his first car design as both technical partner and team principal. The reason is that he allegedly found a way to claw back nearly all that lost downforce. They call it the gray zone, which is a loophole in how the new active wing profiles interact with the floor flexibility. Mercedes and Red Bull have been obsessing over their split power engines, but Newey might have rendered the engine war irrelevant by sticking the car to the track in a way the FIA thought they had banned decades ago. The numbers allegedly keeping rival engineers awake at night are alarming. The FIA introduced active aero under the 2026 overhaul, meaning wings that flatten on straights for speed and pop up in corners for grip. The intended trade-off was a massive loss in cornering speed to make the cars harder to drive, sliding around like the glorious beasts of the 1980s. However, data leaking from Aston Martin's simulation runs suggests the AMR26 is hitting cornering loads almost identical to the 2025 generation cars, which shouldn't be physically possible. Reading the rulebook shows a smaller floor area, a restricted diffuser, and a narrower car. Yet insiders claim Newey's chassis is generating vertical load figures that suggest he isn't using the air the way the rules intended. The car appears to be mechanically sealing itself to the asphalt during high-speed cornering instead of accepting the loss. This goes beyond a marginal gain of 2 or 3 points of downforce. We are talking about a fundamental performance gap that could see Fernando Alonso lapping 2 seconds faster than the field in Barcelona next week. The paddock chatter has shifted from who will win to whether the championship is already over before the lights go out in Australia. This gray zone concept comes down to the interaction between the new active wings and the suspension. The 2026 rules were very specific about banning skirts and physical seals that touch the ground because they cause the dangerous porpoising we saw back in 2022. However, the regulations left a tiny ambiguity in the definition of suspension geometry when the car is in Z mode, which is the high downforce setting for corners. Reports from Italian tech analysts suggest Newey has designed a reactive rear suspension that squats under specific aerodynamic loads. This brings the floor edges millimeters from the track surface without technically sealing them with a physical skirt. It effectively recreates the Venturi ground effect tunnels that the FIA tried to outlaw. The AMR26 reportedly creates a low-pressure vacuum that is totally independent of the engine speed by manipulating the pitch of the car perfectly in sync with the active front wing flaps. Other teams are struggling to balance their cars as the wings move, but Newey has turned the entire chassis into one giant intelligent aerodynamic device. It is classic Newey because he is obeying the letter of the law while completely ignoring its spirit. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications on if you want to stay ahead of every technical twist in this 2026 season, because we track these developments daily so you don't have to. We must now examine the risk Newey is taking. This breakthrough didn't come easily, and it almost cost them the car launch. We know now that Adrian Newey delayed the final sign-off for the AMR26's rear suspension geometry until just days ago. This is a high-stakes poker game that Newey has played before, notably when he held back production drawings for the Williams FW14B or the Red Bull RB19 until the 11th hour to refine his aerodynamic surfaces. This delay was key for the 2026 car. The gray zone solution required a suspension layout that is incredibly complex to manufacture. Signing it off in November, like a normal technical director, would have resulted in a standard, safe car. Waiting until January bought his team 2 extra months of wind tunnel time to perfect the airflow structures. However, this puts immense pressure on the mechanics, who are likely building the car right now, around the clock, with parts arriving fresh from the autoclave. They have no spares if the carbon fiber cracks during the first day of testing in Spain. It is an all-or-nothing gamble that relies entirely on the simulation data being 100% accurate. There is another reason Newey had to swing for the fences with the chassis, which is that the engine might be a ticking time bomb. 2026 marks Honda's official, full factory return with Aston Martin, and the rumors out of Japan are less than optimistic. The new power units are a 50-50 split between internal combustion and electric power, running on 100% sustainable fuels. The engineering challenge is massive, and Honda admitted just yesterday that they are on a very short timeline for reliability testing. We have heard whispers of thermal management issues when the electric motor deploys its full 350 kilowatt boost. The car needs to be efficient enough to run at lower power modes and still be fast if the engine is fragile. This explains Newey's obsession with the floor seal. If the AMR26 has superior drag-free downforce, they can run the Honda engine more conservatively to save it from blowing up, while still setting purple sectors in the corners. The chassis isn't just a weapon, but also a shield, protecting a power unit that might not be ready for a 24-race season. It is the exact opposite of the Red Bull strategy, where he often had the best engine, as here he has to compensate for a potential deficit. The reaction from rival teams has been swift and fearful. Mercedes and Ferrari have reportedly already contacted the FIA for clarification on suspension-controlled ride height mechanisms. They haven't seen the Aston Martin car yet, as nobody has, but they know Newey. They know that if he has found a way to link the active aero to the suspension, their own designs are instantly obsolete. The mood is reportedly tense at Audi, who are entering their first season as a full factory team after spending 3 years developing a car based on the standard interpretation of the 2026 rules. The budget cap becomes a nightmare if Aston Martin shows up in Barcelona next week with a car that corners flat like a go-kart, while everyone else is wrestling with instability. Teams cannot just copy a concept like this overnight, because it requires a fundamental redesign of the gearbox casing and mounting points. The rest of the grid is looking at a 6-month lead time to catch up, if Newey is right. That means the entire season is gone. The fear goes beyond losing the first race to losing the entire year before it begins. His title makes this situation different from his Red Bull days. Adrian Newey isn't just the designer anymore, but serves as the team principal for 2026. He replaced Andy Cowell in the top job to gain unprecedented power. He had Christian Horner managing the politics and Helmut Marko managing the drivers at Red Bull, just as he had Patrick Head at Williams and Ron Dennis at McLaren. But Newey is the ultimate authority at Aston Martin. This means nobody stops him if he wants to spend the entire development budget on a controversial suspension system. He goes to the stewards himself if he wants to protest a rival innovation. This singular vision is dangerous for his competitors. We are seeing a fully unrestricted Adrian Newey, backed by Lawrence Stroll's billions with zero corporate red tape standing in his way. He has stripped the technical department of 7 senior staff members who didn't align with his vision and installed his own trusted lieutenants. This car is his pure, unfiltered vision of what a 2026 Formula One car should be, which is a terrifying prospect for everyone else. We won't have to wait long to see if the rumors are true, since the pre-season test in Barcelona starts on January 26th. The telltale sign won't be the lap times, because teams always sandbag in the first week. The sign will be the car's behavior in Turn 3, which is the long, high-speed right-hander, so watch the ride height. We will know the gray zone loophole is real if the Aston Martin stays glued to the tarmac with zero oscillation, while the active wings are adjusting. Also, look at the spray if it rains, because a sealed floor throws up a very specific water trail compared to a standard diffuser. Newey knows the cameras will be zooming in on his rear suspension, so expect plenty of carbon fiber covers and mechanics forming human walls in the pit lane. However, you cannot hide physics. The protest papers from Toto Wolff and Fred Vasseur will be drafted before the lunch break on day 1 if that car rotates with the mechanical grip of a 2025 machine. The 2026 season hasn't started, but the war has already begun. This loophole completely reshapes the hierarchy of Formula One for the next 5 years if it stands. We aren't just looking at Aston Martin winning a race, but rather the potential for a Brawn GP-style domination, where one team finds a trick that nobody else spotted. It would vindicate Lawrence Stroll's massive investment and cement Adrian Newey's legacy as the undisputed greatest of all time by proving he can win with a 4th different team. The implications could also swing in the opposite direction. The FIA could ban the suspension geometry immediately if they decide this gray zone violates the intent of the regulations. That would leave Aston Martin with a car designed around a system that is no longer legal, forcing them to revert to a base concept that might be seconds off the pace. The line between genius and illegal is razor thin in F1. Newey is walking that line with a confidence that suggests he has read the rulebook better than the people who wrote it. The 2026 era was supposed to reset the field, but it might just have crowned a new king before a single wheel has turned. The simulator numbers are terrifying, the rivals are panicked, and the AMR26 hits the track in just a few days to prove it all real. We'll be covering every lap of testing right here, so make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss the fallout. Thanks for watching.